Hello and welcome to episode 30 of Off the Bandstand. My name is Christian Wiggs. I am your host. Today's episode is Damian Garcia, one of the most working jazz pianists in the city. He's performed alongside greats like Paquito de Rivera, Butch Miles, Wayne Bergeron, and Bob Mintzer, just to name a few. And Damian has always been someone who I've looked up to, not only because of his innovative playing, but because of the wisdom and perspective that he's given me over the past several years. So in this episode, we talk about imposter syndrome and anxiety on the bandstand. We also talk about visualization and how it's conducive to accomplishing career goals, and a blues cruise from hell that seriously made Damian consider jumping ship. So jumping into the records of the week that we want to plug, of course, we plugged this one a few weeks back, but the record is called Silsby, and it's from Sam Pankey, Dan Dufour, and Damian Garcia, all people who have now been guests of Off the Bandstand, and it's just an incredible record. In the last episode, episode 29, Sam talked about how the album was really just birthed out of making a Houston trip. You know, they went down on a Friday, played Cezanne, a prolific jazz venue in Houston, and then drove 2 hours outside of Houston to a small town called Silsby, where it was really just cows and pasture, and recorded this album the next morning in 3 hours, packed up their gear, went back, played another gig at Cezanne, and then drove back home to Austin. And even though it was recorded in a pinch, you'd hardly be able to tell the relationship that the three of them have built musically and personally really just makes for some incredible authentic music. So if you want to purchase this record, you can go over to sampanky.bandcamp.com and you can get a digital copy there. You can also go to danieldufour.com, and he has physical copies available as well. I promise it's worth every last cent. And then of course, if times are tough, we know that. So if you just want to go and stream it and support it that way, it is on all the major streaming platforms as well, and on YouTube and such. So go and check that out. The second one that we want to plug is a brand new one to the show, like we do every week. This one is from Jacob Wise and his Quartet. This is called Paseo, and this was released back in 2019. What an incredible record. I started checking it out yesterday, and it had been on my to-do list for a really long time, and just immediately from the first track, which I believe is called Panther Burn, it just puts you in this mindset that they are the captain or captains of the ship, and you can just totally relax because the arrangements are so well thought through. They are perfectly executed, and Jacob's playing and his tone is so soothing, so relaxing, and exciting, which is a weird dichotomy to have, but it works so well. So if you want to support Jacob Wise and his musical endeavors, you can go to jacobwisejazz.com, and then if you want to support this album, you can get a digital or physical copy at jacobwise.bandcamp.com. Bandcamp is such an incredible resource, and they are so great to musicians. It's why many of us choose to place our music there, because it is where musicians can benefit the most from being able to put their music out there for people to consume. So of course, now moving on to Monk's Jazz, the pop-up jazz club that has turned into a brick and mortar over the course of the pandemic. It's the club that Colin Shook has been curating these shows 3 to 4 a week, and really just being the glue that is keeping the Austin jazz scene together over the course of the pandemic. So tune in tonight, Thursday, January 28th, to David Mescatique and his trio with special guests. That's going to be David Mescatique on piano, James Suter on bass, Fabio Augustinus on drums, Mike Sailors on trumpet, and then myself on vocals, singing a few tunes just as a guest. And then, of course, next Tuesday is going to be Kirk Covington and his trio. They are going to be live streaming, I believe, out of Kirk's studio in California, and doing a live stream there. So that is also an Austin Jazz Society Project Safety Net concert. Of course, if you are unfamiliar with Project Safety Net, it is an initiative started by Austin Jazz Society where they are collecting funds, and they just hit $100,000 raised to be split, amongst the jazz musicians who are really in need of it right now, just to give them that extra little, push to get to the other side of the pandemic. So if you want to donate to them, it is one of the, most charitable things that you can do, taking care of musicians and making sure that the music lives on. And of course, you can tune into those shows. They are free every single week. And then on Thursday, February 4th, is going to be the Greg Clifford Quartet that Greg and I played just a few times before he started going on tour with a variety of different bands. He's such an eclectic player and one that has been revered since he first got into town and first started going to UT. So I know that I'm going to tune into that show and hear what he has to offer. It's always just of the top-notch quality. So that is it for this week's Monk shows and for all of our announcements. If you want to learn more about any of those different things, you can go to monksjazz.com and you can also go to austinjazzsociety.org. And of course, support those releases of the week for Jacob Wise and Sam Pankey, Dan Dufour, and Damian Garcia. And that's it. Let's dive right into this episode. Here is episode 30, Damian Garcia. This is Off the Bandstand.
Beer right away. I start getting sleepy, or I'm just like, I just want to lay down. Like after 2 IPAs, it's nap time.
That's the start, man. That's the start.
Yeah.
After 2 IPAs, it's nap time.
Yeah, it is. I'm done.
That's funny, man. Well, how have you been, man? Like, what have you been? You know, you and I have done some like recording stuff, seeing each other. But what do you fill your time with?
Man, you know, this whole pandemic thing, it's kind of been kind of nice because it gives you a lot of time to focus on things that you probably might not have had a chance to realize that you need to focus on.
Yeah.
Because you are so caught up with performing and paying the bills. And, you know, when you get a gig, you're always saying, well, if you're like me, then you'll probably say yes to mostly everything.
Yeah.
Just because you've gotten in the habit of like performing like every night and you like the bread coming in. So when there's not a lot of stuff to do, and now I can kind of relax and prioritize other stuff like fitness and like mental health and that kind of stuff, eating better, not getting canes on the way home after a gig or something, you know?
I feel personally attacked on that.
or like other stuff, you know, just being more open to doing stuff that's not really music related, which I find pretty refreshing because you can just get caught up in doing so many music related stuff, and then you can kind of get sidetracked as to what's really important to you musically, you know?
Yeah. Man, do you find that by going and focusing on the things that are non-music related, that then directly or indirectly helps your playing just by maybe either taking a break or also getting like kind of life experience that then is your channel it through the music that's back on?
Totally. Totally. Because just there's been times where during this whole pandemic, sometimes I don't even touch the piano for like 2 or 3 days, you know? And back then I was like, okay, well, I have to manage my time because I have to practice here and I have to practice for 2 hours. I have to make sure that I study this music and then do a whole bunch of other stuff that's music related, but it's not really a priority in your own personal music experience. So it's pretty nice. And getting away from music, it makes you really appreciate it from a different point of view. So there's a lot of people who are like, there's a lot of people who are struggling during this whole pandemic, and they're having like mental health issues, and they're just like down. They're like, when are the gigs gonna come back? And you know, aside from the gigs being the primary source of income for most musicians, it's really given me time to just like chill and wake up to why I enjoy playing music. And sometimes that involves just listening to music for like 2 or 3 days while you're running or like working out, and you're just like, you have time to do other stuff. You have time to listen to other types of music, which is, it's just refreshing. It just breathes new life into why you chose to be a musician. It's great. I'm definitely flourishing during the pandemic. I don't feel strapped for cash because I teach. I don't feel like depressed. I don't feel anxious. There's days where I feel unmotivated maybe, and I don't have a clear roadmap maybe to like what am I going to do today?
Yeah, right.
Like, what am I going to do today? Somebody like you know, we're very different personalities. You're really like, you're super structured, you're organized, you can do 1,000 things in one day. And then at the end of the day, you're still fresh, you know? But for me,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
For me, I'm like the opposite. I'm like, I'm really like chill. I rarely ever schedule things in. I kind of just go like with the flow. And it's not really like the best approach, but it's something that I didn't have the opportunity to kind of experience since last March, when you know, it was normal for me to play 3 gigs in a day.
Yeah. Well, man, I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, I certainly think that, you know, I try to stay busy because of the fact that, you know, at the beginning of, well, I mean, I think I've always kind of felt this way since high school, really, you know, just trying to be involved in musical theater and trying to be involved in band and trying to balance being both a trumpet player and a singer. But at that point, you know, trumpet player was taking more of the priority and trying to focus on, you know, marching band, and then, you know, doing dual credit stuff in high school. And then I think that I guess we could call it a work ethic, but I don't want it to be so arrogant as to be like my work ethic. No, I think it was just this inward feeling of like, and I think this is toxic. The reason why I'm talking about this is I do recognize some of those toxic things in myself, and I've been able to see them a little bit more clearly since the start of the pandemic too, is that, you know, I would be focused really on, okay, well, I need to get all these things done because you know, maybe my worth is tied up in the accomplishments. And I think that's something that musicians can really relate to across the board too.
Totally.
The mental health conversation for musicians is one that is like mentioned so much as like kind of a trope a little bit. And it's like, oh, well, it comes with the territory. And, you know, the people who are great musicians, they all had like tons of baggage, but it really does need to be like more of a pretty serious conversation. But, you know, whenever you're saying, you know, I can get all these things done, it's still fresh. I appreciate you saying that, but, you know, there's certainly like right now, like I'm involved in a few different projects that haven't been announced, but, you know, at the end of the day, sometimes I'm like, man, there's nothing else that I want to do other than, you know, sadly drink a Dr. Pepper and maybe go get some Canes right now, you know, that it's just kind of, you know, like soul food to charge me, right? But I think, you know, it's also one of those things where you wake up in the morning and you don't really wake up due to like, oh, and I'm fully refreshed. It's kind of that feeling of, oh shit, I need to get stuff done you know, now. And it's that kind of that dread of like, oh, well, there's another hour gone if you slept until like 10, 11. You know, and I'm kind of going off on several different tangents, but to kind of wrap up where I was leading with that is, you know, I think that's something that's a big conversation that needs to be had about musicians who play into the wee small hours in the morning, because there is such a stigma about like, all right, you know, hardworking regular musicians, you know, a lot of parents will tell musicians like, oh, you work during the day and then nighttime is, you know, so it kind of, because of the fact that our standard workday is not it doesn't consist of the normal hours. It consists of the times that goes way into the night. Then we get off our gig at 3 a.m. We sleep until 11 a.m. But to some people who, you know, they say, what time did you wake up? You say, oh, I woke up at 11 a.m. They'll be like, oh, you're lazy, you're a bum. And it can really start to mess with the headspace of a musician. So I think definitely during COVID times, when we do wake up at 11 a.m., but we don't really have much to do because our job, and for some people, our identity has been stripped away from us a little bit, it kind of leaves you like a person without a, you know, what's the saying, like a man without a nation, you know, where you're kind of like, oh no, what do I do? How do I fill my time? So I think to after a long amount of tangents, to wrap that back up in a bow, I think that's where I come from with just trying to stay busy, is like, I need to feel like the things that I'm doing are purposeful, and, you know, I don't want to take too much time off, you know, or else I feel like maybe I'm moving backwards a little bit. But it's something that and I'm sure a lot of musicians or artists really, in my case, need to be working on too. So.
Well, I've always been super, attracted to mental stability and practicing. Surprisingly, my routine for meditation and for reflection and that kind of stuff. I don't really like to use the word self-care because it sounds already like overused with the whole pandemic thing.
Sounds like a term that you'd see on the front cover of like an airplane magazine.
Yeah, it's like self-care. Like, oh man, every time I see self-care on Instagram, and it's just like, oh, this is bullshit.
Right.
I mean, I know it's going to offend some people, but like every time I see that word, it's just like up there with like the words that already piss me off, like curbside and like like social distancing and like those words already, like I'm sick of hearing those words, especially like curbside. Oh my God, I hate that word now.
That's funny. Would you say that that's because it feels almost like a more shallow or surface level like description of things, or just because it's like an overused?
Yeah, it's like overused. It's like every influencer now is going off of the hot topic of self-care, and now every day is fucking self-care, you know. Bubble baths, bath bombs, fucking having wine at the end of the day or whatever, you know. Like that's not what it means to me. For me, I've always been attracted to the routine of meditating for the sake of being self-aware and grounded, and dealing with one of the main things for me is like anxiety during performing. Not really like anxiety in general, just anxiety performing. When you're in a situation in front of an audience and you have that inner monologue in your head that's saying, man, what the hell are you doing here? Like, do these people know that you're full of shit? Or like, you know, this is the imposter syndrome that bugs most musicians. And I definitely know there's not a musician who doesn't struggle with imposter syndrome, just because of the fact that music is our identity. And I think this whole pandemic has really made me realize that there's nothing wrong with taking a day job, and there's nothing wrong with doing stuff that's not music related. There's nothing wrong with going away from music. There's nothing even wrong with calling yourself, I don't know, maybe like as far as like saying you're not a musician, but you enjoy making music, because maybe a musician says that you have to work as a musician full time. And that's what I feel really comfortable these days with. I'm a musician because I love playing music. I don't think like calling myself a musician really forces me to work in music. But that's just the way it's been. I've been working in music since forever. Like it's rare that I mean, I had a few jobs in the beginning when I was first starting out, but the whole thing about mental health and making sure that you are not staying busy for the sake of just being busy, not practicing for the sake of just practicing, that you're practicing because you love music and you want to be there, and there's something that you see in your visualization of where you want to be 5 years from now. And sometimes it's as easy as working backwards from that goal. Like I'm always doing visualization. Sometimes the visualization doesn't even pertain to music. Sometimes it pertains to other goals, fitness goals or health goals or whatever.
Yeah, elaborate on that, because I'm so curious. And I mean, there's so many things that you're saying that I'm just like, yes, 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 firing off on all cylinders. But elaborate that on like the visualization. Are you saying like things that are, I'm just going to throw out one of the more like brash, like kind of, stigma examples, but like, I don't think that these are entirely bullshit. If it works for some people, like the idea of like a vision board, right? Where they like put something up there, and it doesn't have to be like, the musician that you love, that their picture is cut out with a heart around it. It's like not like that on your vision board, but just the idea to kind of visualize where you want to be. What do you mean by visualization? What does that look like for you?
That's actually a really great question. I think, I never want to knock on anybody's way of visualization. Like I say the word self-care is bullshit because it just has so many, now it's just overused, right? But for visualization, the vision boards and the affirmations and all that stuff, that's totally valid, because those are all tools that you can use to recreate a goal in your head like you already have it. And the more that it sounds kind of crazy because it goes into like the law of attraction and all that stuff. But I'm kind of into that. I'm kind of into that school of thought where your thoughts become your actions. Like you are what you are, and go. I think, therefore I am, you know? And if you believe something deep enough, it's gonna start manifesting itself into your daily life. And for example, with music, I'm really a strong believer in that talent is not really a main component in a musician's success. I personally think that anybody can be a musician. I think guys that you really look up to, like Kurt Elling and a bunch of other musicians, I think those guys, they're talented, but more so, I think they just figured it out as far as the exact steps of what to do in order to get from point A to point B. And it sounds easy on paper. I mean, it sounds easy when you say it, but on paper, getting from point A to point B, there's a bunch of little things that you could do to get from point A to point B. And sometimes it's easier to think about that end goal and then work backwards and think about, okay, so in order for me to do this, I have to do this, and then this, and then this. But I think the struggle with most musicians is that the end goal is so big that they don't fully believe it because it doesn't fit reality. Right. And they think, how can I ever play like, Mulgrew Miller? How can I ever play like the amazing people that we love listening to? And it's sad to say, but if you're really honest, sometimes it just comes down to being lazy. It just comes down to, okay, am I going to get out of bed? And what am I going to do? The first thing that I do, what's the first thing that I'm going to do when I get out of bed? Am I going to do the work? Am I going to listen to these recordings and put in the work to transcribe what needs to be transcribed? Or do I need to do this or this or this, in order to get to that goal? And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Once you start thinking about it that way, you realize, man, these guys, they probably work their asses off. It's not talent, of course they had some talent. A small percentage of it was talent, natural talent that was probably a product of whatever their upbringing was. Maybe they were in a musical household. Their dad had a bunch of records that they introduced to them, and they grew up very open-minded to music.
Yeah.
And so those factors probably are tied into talent, but the rest of it, it's just like hard work. And sometimes I feel motivated by that because I'm thinking, yeah, anybody can go. I honestly believe that anybody can be in New York. Anybody can be famous. Anybody can be represented by Blue Note or Mac Avenue or whatever, Totally. Like you, me, we all can do it.
Yeah.
The factor in that is how much are you going to prioritize that goal so that you do the prerequisites that need to happen before you reach that goal.
Yeah.
And that's where the visualization comes in, because you just start thinking about this stuff and thinking about it in such great detail that it's already happened in your head. And you already know that it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
And that can be a huge motivator, but it can also be like, it can be crushing under the expectation because you want to do this so badly. But I think what really helps in that regard is knowing that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter it doesn't matter the time. It just matters that it's going to happen. And as long as you believe it's going to happen, why worry? Why stress yourself out?
Yeah.
Why get anxious and why get unmotivated? Once you start doing that, it starts getting you farther away from your goal, and you start getting all these mental health issues of like anxiety and depression and a bunch of stuff like that.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that even speaks to you. And man, there's so much that I even started writing down some notes as you were talking, because I was like, oh man, that. This is, really, really fascinating. I love that we're talking about this kind of thing, because this is something that I feel like people don't talk about enough, because of the fact that it takes a certain amount of vulnerability outside of music.
Self-awareness too. If you think about where you are right now, and you talked to Christian 10 years ago, and you told him, hey, you're going to be doing this, you're going to be having a podcast, you're going to be with your hand in a bunch of different projects, you have 4 records or 3 records or whatever it is, would you believe that the future Christian would have told you that 10 years ago?
Oh man, I don't know if I would believe it, but I would certainly be like, holy shit, that's it. I could die happy. I think that's another conversation too, is that we keep pushing the boundary line, right? Of well, if I can just get to here, I'm going to be happy. Or if I can just accomplish this goal, I'll be happy. And this is more on the vulnerable side of really talking about something that is profoundly personal. But you and I, right? We did that session the other night. We recorded, and I remember leaving and calling Lydia right afterwards and telling her, I was like, man, I just had, an incredible conversation with Damian, and just that it was so meaningful to me, and it really put a lot of things into perspective. You and I were talking about the idea of being a student of the music and a student of the craft always. And I was kind of processing in real time, God bless Lydia for putting up with it, but I sometimes have to talk through a lot of things, and it takes me a while with her, and she just kind of sits and listens and gives her input whenever I start to maybe go off on a tangent based on a notion that I have that is maybe not based in reality. But I was telling her, I was like, I feel like now I'm kind of a little bit at the cusp of a new where I'm setting a new goalpost, because when I was 17, and I was just getting into jazz, and I got what I thought to be, you know, the most monumental gig, which was, you know, opening for the Houston Symphony and for this singer named Tony DeSere. I was like, this is it, baby. Like, I've made it. And then, you know, those 3 nights opening came and went. And then I went back to school. I was finishing my senior year in high school. And then I was like, well, okay, I'll start, you know, I'll just start being a big gigging musician and it's all going to work out for me. And then I started working at this, you know, American food restaurant, you know, playing for $20, a milkshake, fries, and a burger, you know, and you know, people, I've never said this out loud, but like the owner would, you know, be like, hey, if you want to, if I'll buy you like a frozen frap, you know, from Starbucks if you go and also get my drink order. And I was like, cool, I'm in high school, you know, free coffee, cool, you know, and I was perfectly fine with that. And then I was like, wait, no, you know, I need to do the next thing. So I set this new goalpost, and then I put out my first record, and I listened back at like several months after that. I was like, no, that sucked. I need to do something with actual arrangements. And then put out the second record. I was like, this is it. And then 6 months after that, I was like, oh, that sucks. You know, I need to be doing this other thing. And I think that's like a big point of, you know, where it can be damaging if we get lost in it and we hit a point of damaging or diminishing returns. But having that visualization of where you want to go and constantly kind of acclimating your ear to what comes next to accomplish that goal. You use the analogy of like point A to point B, right? But I would even, you know, devil's advocate say that it's really not point A to point B. It's like point A to AZ, you know, like, and there's all these, you know, sometimes I feel like there's a stigma that it's like, oh, you know, point A to point B. And some people say, oh, you know, their musical journey was this to this. But there's so many areas where it's like, okay, I went forward and then I went way backwards. And like by trying to get to point A to point B, you actually did a lot of things that were detrimental in your career, where you learned what was good and what
totally,
and then learned from that and moved forward, you know, from there.
Well, you know, that's the thing, because, you know, when we were playing a lot of gigs back in the day, like March of last year, before the pandemic started, it was not uncommon for us to be playing a gig every single day, right?
Right.
And
or several.
Yeah, or several gigs in one day. So you get into this pattern for about 2 or 3 years, 4 years, and you start slowly pulling back from these goals because your mind is so busy with what's happening at the moment. And you're focused on getting the gig done, and you're focused on having your calendar full. And it's nice because the bread is there, right? The bread is coming in, you have money, but it doesn't let you focus on why you originally started to play music. And if you think about it, think about to when we were first starting out and you were super hungry, right? Remember being in college and you're like, man, I want to be good. I want to be like, I want to practice all day. I want to practice this. I'm just checking out all the records. And you were just like so laser focused on your sound right after school, right after college, right? You had no idea of what it was going to be like after school. You had no idea what the real world was going to be like, because you were still in the walls of the university of the music program. So all you knew was within those walls, and your metric for tracking how good you sounded was either by going up a lab band, or getting into the top combo, or getting to play with this person in town, or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And that was the metric, right? So sometimes I think back to like when I was first starting and how hungry I was. And that same feeling, the hungriness, it wasn't really that clear maybe a year ago, because I was playing so much and I got comfortable. And I feel like comfort is probably one of the biggest enemies to growth, because it makes you not want to take chances.
Yeah.
Like it makes you not want to uproot your entire career and move to another country. It
Sure.
makes you not want to, sometimes it makes you not want to say no to a certain gig,
Sure.
you know, because
Well,
what if I say no? Maybe I'm going to lose this contact or whatever, you know?
right. Well, would you say that comfort, because I've said something very, very similar to this, and maybe this is just semantics that I'm going to bring up like a not simile, but a synonym. I've always said that complacency is the enemy of progress. I remember like dating a girl in high school, right, who was in orchestra, and she was like, I was very focused on like, oh, we need to like improve, yada yada yada, because I was in band, and she was like, no, I'm really just fine. Yeah, I'm cool. I'm cool with where I'm at. And I remember like having a pretty like intense argument like with her, and obviously it didn't work out between me and this person, but I remember having this argument with being like, I just cannot comprehend the idea of being complacent. And that's where I kind of came to that conclusion of like, it just doesn't click, it doesn't communicate with me because there's so much to learn. But you said that, comfort can really be one of the most detrimental things.
I think so, because complacency, I think, is subjective. And maybe our idea of what work ethic is, it's not the same as somebody who's not really trying to be a full-time musician. They
Yeah.
just want to be able to play through a standard with left-hand voicings and like
Sure.
a melody or something, right? In their head, that's hugely out of their comfort zone. In
Yeah.
our head, it's like, well, why don't you try to do this? Why don't you try to go to a session?
Right.
But I think that a lot of stuff that we could learn from music is to be learned outside of music. Like the way that we function in our day-to-day lives, with dating, with how we talk to our parents, how you deal with everyday bullshit, traffic, and that kind of stuff. The minute that you let go of the stuff that you can't control,
Yeah.
and the stuff that you can control, you have a better idea of where you are at the moment. And in musical, like for a musical example, everybody comes from different backgrounds. Those guys, Joey Alexander, prodigies, or whatever, you could grow up in a super musical household with a ton of money, and they just pump all this money into your education growing up. And of course, you're going to go to New York. By the time you're in high school, you're going to be a badass.
Yeah.
And that's just what happens, But it shouldn't let you become discouraged, and you shouldn't try to compare yourself to the point where both people start, because it's totally possible for you to get to that. It's totally possible for you to match that level. You just have to stop being angry.
Yeah.
You didn't have the same upbringing.
Man.
You have to stop being, you know what I mean? You have to stop being emotional about it, and you just have to be like, okay, this is what it is, and what am I going to do about it?
Yeah. Right. Man, that's personally convicting, and I'm sure as it is for a lot of musicians, because that's not a unique scenario. I mean, a lot of
especially now because of social media, you have a window into 12-year-olds chopping out, and they're 5,000 likes, 80,000 followers or whatever.
Right. Yes.
And there's people who legit get angry about it. There's like gatekeepers who are like, man, this guy's bullshit. This guy's bullshit. All he does is just chop out, and he gets like 1,000 likes in 1 minute and 1 billion followers. And at the end of the day, it's like, dude, like, who cares? Why are you so angry about that?
Yeah.
What can you do about that?
Man, I'll even be vulnerable and say, I really love the comedian Pete Holmes and his show, his podcast, which is called "You Made It Weird," because this is exactly what that is. And I'm so elated that we're talking about these kind of things and kind of getting into like the nitty gritty of a lot of these like stereotypes that we experience as musicians. But Pete is always very vulnerable, and I really like that, and I want to follow suit. And I remember whenever I was listening and toiling over the mixes for the last album I put out, Between Love and Fascination, right? And I was just listening back, and I spent, we went through like 8 rounds of mixes, and not because like everyone, I was just tweaking little things. I mean, some of them were things where, I was finding my footing as a producer too, and just figuring out what sounds good. And, bless Charlie Kramsky, an incredible engineer who, was really focused. He would give me his input if I asked for it, or if something was like really off the wall, if I was going too far in the opposite direction of what he thought might sound good. But he certainly was going to give me exactly what I wanted, so I could hear those different things. And whenever I would say, "Well, I'm sorry for the 1,000,001 mixes that we're doing," he would say, "No, it's fine." He was like, and he said something that stuck with me. He's like, "You don't know you don't like something until you hear it." And
Exactly.
then like it. And I was like, whoa, man, like the humility. I mean, this guy has mixed everyone from Tony Bennett to Willie Nelson, the Roots, all these different guys, and Brad Meldown, people like that. For him to extend that grace to me, was really, really fantastic. But back to the original, point was that I was doing these mixes, or listening to these mixes, and I remember comparing myself and being like, okay, this is my 3rd album. Kurt's 3rd album was The Messenger, and The Messenger is a badass fucking record. Like that is an incredible record. That's got Nature Boy, that's got April in Paris.
Oh yeah, I know that record.
Anya Jean, just like, and then really like out there stuff like Endless, like that's like that's a pretty out there avant-garde, piece. But, I was like, oh, all these innovative things, and that's his 3rd record. And this is my 3rd record. And am I even close to the plane that he's on? No, I'm not. They just like really ridiculing myself and my scatting and all this different stuff. And then, I also then thought, okay, well, at the time I was like, okay, I'm 23. And then I looked up what age he was when he put out his 3rd record. And I believe he was 30 or he was 31. And
Wow.
At the time, that gave me a lot of solace. And I was like, okay, great, I have time. But now even looking back on that, and that was, well, I was going to say it was 6 months ago, but then again, COVID has kind of made us lose track of all time.
Who knows what day it is now?
So I guess it was like about a year ago now, and maybe even a little more than that. And I realized like just how kind of fucked up that mentality is, to constantly be comparing yourself to somebody based on if you're on the same number record of what you put out or where you're at age-wise, because like you're saying, it doesn't really matter. The upbringing or what prerequisites you had, whatever age, is not the point. The point is, if you have the same fervent attitude of really working towards that goal and working towards like that craft. And I think a huge part of it also comes down to, and I, as a singer, am certainly guilty of this, but like removing your ego from the equation and really like just trying to be a servant of the music in general. Like David Mescatique, and I hope that I'm saying this, he's taking some lessons with Gerald Clayton right now.
Right.
And Gerald Clayton was just saying to him, he was like, above all, you got to be a servant of the music, or as I understand it from David, I certainly don't want to put words in either of their mouths, but I think that's something that we lose along the way. We're so inspired that we want to live up to the legacy, and then yet we profoundly make it about ourselves.
Yeah. That's true. I think as musicians, it's very hard to not become defensive of what we do because of that thing that we said earlier. It's your identity. And when somebody attacks your music and your playing, they're attacking you personally because you make music your identity. It's what you've devoted your entire life to. And now, because you've devoted your entire life to this thing, now what else is there, you know?
Yeah.
Are you just a musician, or are you somebody else with many things that make you who you are, not just music? And just with like a lot of people in any scene, you have the people who are eternal students, and then you have the gatekeepers who, just from being on Facebook, you know, you have the gatekeepers who get seriously offended by people who don't take the tradition seriously. And then like because of the pandemic, like what I've had time to like kind of ask myself, well, what is tradition in art that is constantly evolving? You know, I went to a school like North Texas where it has a reputation for being a bop school because we do a lot of straight ahead jazz, and we do a lot of small groups. We don't really have the reputation that another school like Manhattan School of Music has, where they don't really put a lot of emphasis on big band. They don't put a lot of emphasis on sight reading and that kind of stuff. But, you know, a school like North Texas, they were very rooted in making students well-versed in the tradition.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that when you get out of school, that you realize that the tradition was there just so you can learn the rules.
Yeah.
And after that, it doesn't really matter what everybody else thinks. You know, somebody tells you, well, you know, if you don't like Art Tatum, or if you don't like I don't know, just like, you know, like old heads, they're like, oh, you don't like Barry Harris or whatever, and you'd be like, oh, you don't like John Coltrane? And I'll be the first to say that for a long time, I thought John Coltrane was horrible. Like, it was awful. I couldn't listen to it.
Yeah.
Like, I would listen to like India and I'd be like, what the hell is this? Like, like, why would anybody listen to like 12 minutes of this like stuff? But the problem was that it just wasn't my time to appreciate what I was listening to. And the more that somebody told me I had to do something, the less I wanted to be appreciative of it. And it wasn't until much later that I started appreciating, whoa, this is like some deep shit. And, you know, I didn't have a Bill Evans phase like most piano players do. I totally skipped past that phase because I thought Bill Evans was boring. It wasn't really like my bag.
Interesting. Okay.
I was more into like.
Can you say more about that, of like why? And this certainly isn't like a thing where it's like picking it apart for people to shit on, you know. Like I'm just
we're just going down the line. Who else can we shit on?
For sure, no, but because like I you know, one of the things that because on that record, right, I did Nardis. I wrote a vocalese to Nardis, and so I really, you know, wanted to not only, I think sometimes the detriment of a lot of singers who do vocalese, or even the instrumentalists who do vocalese, is that they'll focus on the one tune and they'll view it as an isolated incident, and then they'll write the vocalese, rather than like trying to absorb the catalog and listen to that person, understand a little bit more of the personality within their playing, and also historically speaking, and then try to write something that is indicative of what you're hearing. So I, you know, one of the things I would listen to Bill and hear was that he was saying more by playing less, or at least what I had thought at the time, and you know, again, vulnerably, I would say, you know, believe still. But I certainly, as someone who is not a pianist, and as someone who has not spent the same amount of time on Bill Evans as I have on, you know, someone like Kurt Elling, I certainly would want to be open to all viewpoints. So can you elaborate about why you thought that Bill Evans was boring, you know, boring, so to speak?
Well, I thought it was boring when I was much younger because when I first started out, I actually didn't start listening to a lot of piano players. I started my jazz, my jazz journey listening to a lot of singers and a lot of saxophone players. So I was super into Oscar Peterson. I was super into Chet Baker. I was super into Kenny Barron. And I'm sure you can hear this now in my playing. Those sounds definitely come up. I was super into Hampton Hawes and Kenny Garrett, a bunch of other people. But when I would go listen to Bill Evans' records, it didn't really resonate with me because I didn't feel like it had the I didn't feel like it had the soul that I was comparing to somebody like Oscar Peterson, you know.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
But when I got older, I was realizing that there were a lot of rules in jazz, and everybody tells you what you have to listen to, when to listen to it, that you have to go in an order in order for you to really get a full sense of the tradition. And I think now, as a teacher, I think that's bullshit. I think you're not going to get good at jazz listening to whoever somebody else tells you to listen to.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to get good first listening to what is important to you, however you relate to what you're listening to. It doesn't even have to be jazz. It could be whatever, like, pop music. It could be crossover, like all the stuff that's happening now. So when I got older, and this was actually like in the last 5 years that I've really started appreciating Bill Evans.
Yeah.
I was checking out that Village Vanguard, Live at the Village Vanguard record.
Yeah. What is that? Waltz for Debbie? The record? Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember when it hit me because I had gotten that gift, I had gotten that record as a gift from my sister on vinyl. And I remember listening to my living room, listening to it and listening to Gloria Step. And I was like, holy shit. Like this guy is insane. Like, holy fuck. And it's not just Bill Evans, because I don't feel the same emotion listening to Bill Evans solo piano. It still hasn't hit me yet. But when I listen to Bill Evans as Bill Evans the band, man, it's incredible.
Is that specific to the trio, like each individual trio? Because he was with like Eddie Gomez for like a bit, right? And then of course we know like the iconic trio to be Scott LaFaro and Paul Motian. Is there a specific trio that hits more than others, or is it really just the trio in general?
I don't think I have a preference for any of the trio, because I really like the stuff that he did with Eddie Gomez. And I really like the stuff that he did with Scott LaFaro. And then I think after Eddie Gomez, it was the other guy from North Texas. I forgot his name, bass player. He was also part of his trio. But I think we had talked about this, where it's very important for you to make a band with people who are on the same wavelength. This not necessarily the same musical talent, but the same wavelength, to where everybody is on the same level of open-mindedness and the same level of music as a collective. Like, we've all listened to the same records, and going to a school like North Texas, or going to any music program, basically, I think there was kind of a bad taste in my mouth, because I would see how a lot of singers and a lot of instrumentalists, just when they choose their small groups, they would always try to snatch up the heaviest players in school.
Yeah.
And so at the end, after we put these small groups together, all the heavy players, they would be in like 3 groups or 4 groups, and they're like, well, we can't do any more. So then it'd be like, well, I guess I'll get this guy, and I guess I get this guy. And truly, when you would hear these groups with the vocalist or with the instrumentalist who got the heavy cats in the group, it didn't sound authentic. it sounded like they were hiding behind the musicianship of these heavy guys. And because you're constantly intimidated by these people who you've already mentally put on a pedestal, it doesn't let you like do what you need to do. So, you know, as a teacher now, I'm always telling guys like, you know, there's some piano players that came up to me in town who asked me for like private lessons just for like a one-off. And I would always tell them, the young guys in town, I was always telling them, you know, it's not really important for you to hire the best players for your band. I know there's a lot of guys who say you should be the weakest link in your band so that you can learn. And I think that's true to some extent, for the sake of lighting a fire under your ass and making sure that you don't slack off. But I think it's even more important for you to hire people who are on the same plane as you mentally and who listen to the same records. And I think that's why a trio with Sam and with Daniel works out so well, because we all listen to the same records. You know, if we were to put together a different trio, luckily in Austin, we all listen to more or less the same type of stuff. But, you know, if you were to put together somebody who just doesn't check out the same records, it would be very hard to create a very sincere piece of music, because you would constantly be in your head that you hired the heaviest guys to make you sound good, and now you're nervous the entire session. So all your word is just about impressing the guys instead of doing what you need to do.
Man, that, you know, I feel like that's going to be convicting to a lot of people, like a lot of people, and not in a way of like, you know, I'm going to put a disclaimer of like explicit language on this one because we, you know, but whatever, but like, yeah, a lot of people are going to, it's not like, oh, fuck you, you know, you idiot for doing this thing of like what you thought would be the right thing, you know, but because like I did the same thing, right? Like I remember whenever, you know, I think one of the people who has mentored me most, like from the very beginning, since I've been in town, has been Matt Maldonado. And like, I've gotten some real tough love from him. I mean, like he has been like somebody who I've been able to open up to about some deep things. And he's been somebody who has really kind of like, not in a shitty way, reduced me down to you know, ground zero, but in a way of like really putting things into perspective with just like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it because I know that you want it this badly. And I remember when I was putting together bands for, and you even played on this gig, whenever I was, you know, doing, I had a residency at Brass House on those like first or second Fridays, whatever it was. And I remember being like, oh, I'm going to get like the heaviest of the heavies. And I'm gonna, you know, and at that point, I'm sure I just sounded like a, you know, I remember you, you know, like awful, you know, not swinging at all. But I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get Lit Do on bass, and I'm gonna get Damian, or I'm gonna get Ross on piano, and you know, all these cats on the bandstand. And I remember thinking that that was going to make me better. And I do think to a certain extent, it makes you hear things that you wouldn't have heard before, you know, but you're right. It is this feeling of kind of thinking that it's taking a little bit of the easy way out in a sense, because you're saying, oh, well, on a subconscious level, I'm going to hire all these heavies around me. So that way, like just by osmosis, I'm going to be up there, rather than having to be the person who is really like leading the charge and coming up with the most innovative shit.
And how comfortable did you feel in that gig?
Oh, not at all. You know, and
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And it wasn't that I didn't feel, it wasn't that the people made me uncomfortable. It was that I was just like, and what I really honestly to this day feel like when I play with you guys, and it's not, certainly I feel comfortable now, you know, but things that you and I were talking about, you know, after that session the other night of being like, you know, when I take a solo, when I scat, when I improvise, you know, I'll take the first one and then I'll listen to you play something. And, you know, you, Damian, piano player, like playing something, and I'll go, oh man, like, why didn't I think of that? And oh man, maybe I should have thought about that. And why is my ear not picking up on that within the changes? You know, and the rational side of me is saying, screaming even, that it's all about experience. It's all about what you're listening to. It's all about, you know, the things that you're transcribing. And, you know, I think that that's a big part of the journey of a musician is being comfortable with the people that you're playing with, and not, you know, where it kind of bypasses jealousy and it gets to the point of just inspiration, and then like internalizing the things that those people are playing, and then just trying to remember it, as opposed to being so caught up with, oh, I'm so uncomfortable now because I feel like I'm a total piece of shit, you know. Yeah, I think that's a huge, another really huge conversation, and it's something that is like kind of convicted me, you know, of like, yeah, don't grab just the heaviest cats in town, you know, grab people that are really gonna connect with you. And
yeah, hire your friends, try to make music with people who bust your balls, you know, off the bandstand, who make fun of you because they're your friends, you know. When you have that level of trust and honesty, somebody can tell you straight up, you know, we all bust each other's balls. This past Saturday at the session, I thought it sounded really good because we were all friends, and we didn't involve our egos. We were just all excited to be there. And I think that was the most important thing, that everybody's excited to be there, and everybody is there not as a chance to show what you've been shedding, but for everybody to make music and have a good time. In a way that satisfies everybody, not just, you know, if you hire like the best piano player in town and just like, and kind of on autopilot. And that kind of sucks. That sucks, because I've been through that. I've been through that in North Texas, you know, playing with a bunch of guys who are just on autopilot sometimes, and it's lame. And some of the best gigs that I've had in Austin, I can really remember. There was one time that you and I played at the Highball, and it was Mason on bass and me on piano, and Matt was on sax. And by the last set, we were all kind of pretty wasted, but we sounded really good, man. And we were just like having a blast. I forgot who was on drums, but it was a blast because we were like,
it was probably either Don, Fabio, or Brendan Howell.
Maybe it was Brendan Howell. I don't think Fabio was here yet. Maybe not, but I remember thinking how good that gig sounded, because we were all like, let's try this. And you were just like, yeah, okay, let's try it. Fuck it. You know, we mess up. And it was some of the stuff that we did, it was like really cool. Another time that I remember a situation where all the musicians who were just like locked in with each other was seeing Rich Harney with Brandon Guerra and Mitch Watkins. No, it wasn't Mitch Watkins. It was Jake Langley, I think, on guitar, with Richard Michael on bass. And I remember seeing that, and I was like, holy fuck, these guys, this has got to be like the best band in Austin. Like, they sounded incredible. Like, nobody was measuring their dicks on stage. Everybody was like super locked in, and there was just good energy all around. Nobody was like, I'm here. This is where the beat. I control the chord. No, I control it. No, I control it. It was just a collaborative effort.
Man, when it comes to collaborative musicians, and I specifically want to laud you on man, the like Silsby, right? Like, and the record, not only the record Silsby, but the dynamic that you have with Sam Pankey and Dan Dufour, and, you know, people like, you know, Carter Arrington, or oh man, why am I going blank? Other fantastic guitar player who was on standards, Jordan Birchill.
Yeah.
I feel really bad. Jordan, it's the Jameson, I promise. I know. No, but like though that set of musicians and like Sean Giddings, right? Like it's all in that same circle is that you guys are really, really focused and dialed into each other and fully committed to like, it's not about that vibe of, you know, I know that the big hot thing right now is Soul, like the Disney Pixar movie, and I love the movie. Like I thought it was great. I think there were some things with jazz that maybe it was like maybe a little off the mark, you know. But like there's like a scene. I don't know if you've seen this movie yet, but
I haven't seen it yet.
This is not any sort of spoiler. It's in the beginning. You know, he goes and kind of auditions for the gig, you know, a couple hours before because he's a last minute sub, and he sits there at the piano, and you know the sax player is kind of like vibing him a little bit, the band leader, and he starts kind of listening. They just pop off into a tune, and he has to kind of like listen and hear what they're playing, and then he goes off into like what is they refer to as like the zone or whatever, and he stops listening and he just starts playing, and then he snaps out of it, and everybody else has stopped playing. They're just looking at him, and he's just kind of like, and they're like, all right, you got the gig. But I do think that is, and I think Jazz Memes even posted a thing about this like 2 days ago, where it was like, yeah, but that is more self-serving. When you go off into another place where it's really focused on like what you were saying earlier, like, oh, I'm gonna, show off what I'm shedding. No, it really takes like an attentiveness. And if you've created an environment collectively, and that's the key word, collectively, where everybody is kind of serving each other, but also has the understanding of like, we know what this musician can do. So, hey, like if I'm Dan Dufour, right, maybe I'll be like, all right, Sam, I'm gonna, in an unspoken way, kind of signal that we're going to hang back and we're going to let Damian kind of do his thing, not because he has a bunch of licks that he wants to show off, but because we know what he's capable of, and we certainly want to showcase like the brilliance that is, you're playing specifically to compliment you on that, within that dynamic. Yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent there. I can't remember exactly what we were talking about that prompted that. But
well, the thing with those guys is, well, even playing with them for so long, I always still feel nervous to play with guys. There's always a slight bit of anxiety or a slight bit of stage nervousness every time I play. It doesn't matter whatever gig I do. When I play with Dan and Sam, those guys are playing at such a high level that it does make me self-conscious sometimes, but in a good way, in a way that makes me feel like they're not going to really like knock me for messing up a head or for forgetting an entrance or whatever. They'll do stuff that I don't expect them to do. Like they'll totally drop out, when we're playing with a quartet or whatever. It's not uncommon for them to just totally stop playing and just leave me by myself. And then I'm just like, oh shit, okay, well, this is cool. Now I have to figure out what's going to happen here. And hopefully it works. And if it doesn't work, it's not really that big of a deal. I'll just get it next time,
Yeah.
Yeah, going back to the thing with ego, I think ego is such a big it's such a big thing in music and in jazz especially, that holds a lot of people back from just being a student and learning. It doesn't matter what level you're on. There's always something to learn. There's always something to learn from my students. There's always something to learn from you. There's always something to learn from anybody, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we were going back to the thing about stressing out and talking about goals and how you can't be angry that somebody got a different upbringing than you.
Yeah.
You also can't be overwhelmed with the idea of perfection, because it doesn't exist in this world.
Yeah.
Can you say that, Kurt Elling is a better singer than Mark Murphy. Can you say that Mark Murphy is a better singer than Lambert Hutcherson Ross? You know, they all did different things,
Right.
and they all executed. Um, they didn't execute perfectionism. They executed conviction, and I think that should be the goal of most musicians when we are practicing and trying to become just a better musician. I think we're going about it all wrong, and I'm still like working through this myself, because sometimes I'll listen to these guys on YouTube and I'll be like, man, he's like Mulgrew Miller. He sounds like amazing. Like how every note is like perfect. How can they do that? Or listen to John Pizzarelli.
Mm.
That's like another group that just like blows my mind. Like, dude, like how can this guy sing these songs just so perfect? And I don't think that's the right way to think about it. I think the goal should be, how well are you able to execute your ideas with confidence and conviction instead of perfection? Because there's no such thing. It's even hard to visualize perfection. What is perfection to you? Like being totally in pitch, hitting a perfect scat solo. What is a perfect scat solo? Something that you think is going to be like killing, you know, another guy's going to listen to it and be like, nah, it's not really my thing.
Yeah, right.
Then what do you do? What do you do after that?
For sure. Man, and to tie that back together to something that you were saying earlier is that, you know, you're saying that there's this feeling of like, okay, well, we're gonna go to university, right? And we're gonna check all the literal boxes, like literal, like you'll go and look at your, like, I can't remember what it's like called, and I'm sure it varies by university, but I remember like on mine, like I would see like the degree plan, like I think it was called degree audit, and it was all the classes that you had to take. And I remember seeing it at the beginning and just being like, fuck, man, you know, there's like 60 something classes I'm going to take over the next 4 years. How am I going to do this? You know, and my parents didn't graduate from university.
Mine neither.
Yeah. And so like, there was this like pressure of like, oh man, like I'm going to have to do this all, you know, and I feel like, and my experience was a little bit different, where mine was a classical degree. And then I was kind of, you know, if I'm being honest with myself, I was fulfilling the things that I needed to fulfill with that classical and like opera degree, but I couldn't wait to get out of the class. And I was even booking gigs. Like I remember
same.
Yeah. Like I remember being in my, I apologize to Dr. Soto for this, but I remember like sitting there and being in like a early childhood techniques course. And I was like, you know, acknowledging the things that she was saying, but dude, I was cold calling every freaking venue in town, like during that, like cold emailing, and then like setting up times to call and sending out like EPKs or whatever, you know. And so I think that the university thing, it really kind of shows this box. And I think Mike Saylors and I were even talking about this, and even Ron Wilkins the other day, you know, on a thing off the bandstand where, you know, it kind of promotes this idea of all these things that you need to do to be this like most killing musician, you know. Think about all these things, think about your intonation, think about how hard you're swinging, think about like what vocabulary you're putting in, and how intently you are hitting the changes, and then like playing stuff that is out. But they don't teach you like the things of like how to get a gig and how to like keep a gig and how to make those relationships with musicians and your clients. And, you know, even I have a student right now who's, you know, really just firing on all cylinders, and he's in the 7th grade, and has even like brought me to tears, like not in front of him, you know, really, but because of the fact that I see such a fire and a desire, and that he just gets it, you know. And it makes me so proud to see, you know, at such a young age, 12, 13, whatever that age is of 7th grade, that it's really hitting for him. But it makes me super happy. But one of the things I was telling him was, I was like, man, like yesterday, you know, is that I'm teaching him to listen for all these things that make him, that pull him out of the music. You know, he sings a song for me the first time, and he's only been studying with me for a few months, and he sings a song for the first time, and you know, he's good. He's got a good voice, but there are like all these different things that I can nitpick and pick apart. And then so I start to train him to hear these things. And as the weeks and the months progress that I've been teaching him, he's been like, oh yeah, I didn't like that as much. Oh, I could hear that I was really wide on this vowel. I let my corners spread, or I wasn't giving, you know, enough in the soft palate. Like I wasn't raising enough and it parachuted back in the back of my throat. You know, all these different things that I've been teaching him to listen for that are really like kind of, you know, in a way they can be, you know, more of a negative focus, right? Because you're focusing on all these things that you really need to fix. And then, you know, and then you can get caught up in that where it takes the soul out of it in the first place, and you're focused on a purely a technical standpoint of the craft, which, you know, and when you're solely focused on the technical part of it, craft almost doesn't even seem like an appropriate term, because you're not focused on the craft. You're focused on the pre-packaged, you know, to use the analogy of the school, like putting it in a box and making sure that it's perfect. And I told him yesterday, I was like, hey man, you know, like, and he was certainly very receptive to this. I told him, you know, look, the whole point of this is that you have these ways of singing that you've, you know, subconsciously absorbed through whatever, you know, media you've been listening to. And now I'm teaching you to dismantle all of that and pick apart each component. But then once you put it all back together, you have to do the hardest thing for any musician, and you have to stop thinking about the technical part of it. The shed is where you think about that. And then when you go to perform, whether it's performing for me at the end of the lesson to try to see what you've absorbed, or whether it's being on the bandstand, it's about the idea of really focusing on the music itself and being a servant of that. And no longer, like, there's nothing that you can do. Someone, I can't remember who it was, shamefully, but someone told me there's nothing that you can do on the bandstand in a moment, or rarely so, that is better, or like the realization of the thing that you've been practicing,
Exactly,
you
yeah.
haven't been able to accomplish before.
Yeah, I heard something similar to that, where you're the worst way that you play, or something like that. It was like the worst gig that you have is actually it's like the best indicator of where you are
Yeah.
at your level, or something like that, right? Where I think it translates similar to what you said. Like anything that you do on the stage is not going to be something that just happens out of the blue. It's something that's already in you, and something that you rehearsed and you practiced in the shed,
Yeah.
right? The only reason that it came out is probably because you just didn't give a shit at the moment, and you let your creativity flow.
Yeah.
I think that's just why a lot of people end up smoking weed on stage, because it's just liberating, and it makes the inner monologue in your head kind of just like take a backseat, or drink, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever your poison is. The thing to remember is that as musicians, like there's no such thing as being perfect, right?
Yeah.
And even more so as jazz musicians, there's a huge amount of knowledge that we have to pull from. And somebody's going to tell you that, well, you know, in order for you to be a really accomplished pianist, you have to learn stride, you have to learn this style, you have to learn this style, and you have to learn how to play in a duo, in a trio, and solo. And I don't think any of that is really valid, because like how you know, how can you do that stuff? And you're gonna do it when it's gonna get done. And like, this is totally off on a tangent, but like learning Japanese lately has really made me comfortable with the idea that I don't have to be perfect to do something.
Yeah.
All I need to do is just do it. And in order for you to like have a conversation in Japanese, you know, are you going to be worrying about the punctuation, the way that your intonation sounds? Are you going to be worrying about the grammar? Are you going to be worrying about how dumb you sound, or are you going to be focused on having a conversation at that moment and just getting in the habit of getting the words out?
Right.
So it's like, yeah, I'll be the first to say my stride is not the strongest because I just haven't had any interest in that.
Mm.
I like listening to it, but it's not really something that I prioritize. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to work on it because I don't need to, because I don't want to. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to work on stride. I would rather work on solo piano and trying to sound like Fred Hirsch, or trying to sound like uh, other people that I really respect, like Keith Jarrett. Those are like my two solo piano idols. When I listen to those guys play, I'm like, man, this is like, these guys are unreal. It's unreal. And it, it just puts into perspective um, that you don't have to master everything in order for you to be happy with yourself.
Yeah.
All come because you have the rest of your life to do everything that you need to get done. You don't need to do, you don't need to be the idea, you don't need to be somebody else's idea. You just need to do what's important to yourself.
Hmm.
And whatever everybody else thinks, fuck it, because you're not gonna make everybody happy. The
Yeah.
best gig that you had in your life, you play it for 10 people, and maybe some of them might say, man, it's not really my thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what's the point, you know?
Yeah.
What's
Right.
the point of trying to do all this stuff? Just do it for yourself and keep your eyes on the prize. And if being the world's greatest stride pianist is your goal, then do that and just focus on that. If being the greatest improviser and not playing any more swing, like a lot of the stuff that's coming out of Europe and Amsterdam and all the cutting edge stuff, it's not, nobody plays swing anymore. It's all this, I listen to it a lot. It's all this like this improvisational music that's hard to even say jazz, but what is jazz, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that just is a really good way of releasing a lot of anxiety that we carry as musicians. And it just helps you organize yourself into what exactly is important to me and that I need to work on. Because I think I'm focusing more on making other people happy and not really making myself happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that is a beautiful full circle moment to, you know, to what we were initially talking about, is like really focusing on the anxiety aspect of being, not even being a musician, man, just being a creative, or being
Creative,
someone
exactly.
or who, you know, and it can even stretch. I mean, this is where I would be a little bit more out of my depth, because of the fact that I feel like to have a solid opinion about this, I would need to be a non-creative or a non-musician, non-artist. But like, even just for someone who feels that they have to be performative as a person, you know, I think it goes down to like the depths of like this need for almost like affirmation, right? As opposed to doing it for the sake of the craft, or if you're not a musician, not a creative, not an artist, doing it for yourself, right? And being true to yourself. Now, certainly there's a million and one, you know, ways you could play devil's advocate and say, you know, well, everyone's saying that something's not working, then maybe like take a little bit of a look in the mirror. But like, you know, if there have been people that I've played with, you know, over the past several years where, you know, they've never explicitly said, you know, I don't dig your style, but I can tell that it's not, based on me going around town and seeing everybody else they're playing with, I can tell it's not necessarily their bag.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And it doesn't make me not want to hire them from a place of like spite. It's more of like, you know, hey, if you want the work, here's the work. But also, if it's not your vibe, and going back to your point of like playing with people who really are on the same wavelength, it's like, you know, I'm happy to provide the work, but also like, if you don't want to play it, I won't be offended, because I know that like we exist in an art form, like jazz being an umbrella where there's so many different types of facets that it's unrealistic to think that everyone wants to fit in every subgenre under that umbrella, and really finding what works, so.
It's important to not be offended in general, just from living and following sort of a stoic philosophy where you don't react to your outside outside stimulations, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not so reactive to when everybody says that they don't like the way that you sound or whatever, or maybe you're stuck in traffic and you're pissed off that you're going to be late to a gig. What can you do about it at that point? You can't do anything. You might as well just let it happen and accept that you're going to be late because you left late.
Yeah.
And that's it, just let it go and it's fine. Just being stoic and non-reactive, don't be so emotional and guard your music like it's part of a personal attack or something like that. You know what I mean?
For sure.
We talked about this the other day about, playing standards. Everybody's already played standards the best way that they know how. There's nobody who's going to sound like Nat King Cole. There's nobody who's going to sound better than Art Tatum. There's nobody who's going to sound better than Keith Jarrett.
Yeah.
They all did their thing the best way they know how. And we spend sometimes so much time trying to sound like these guys. For what? It's like to get more work. Like if that's your goal, then sure, then practice the tunes, learn the whole goddamn real book, learn all 12 keys, listen to all the intros that Miles played and become that guy.
Yeah.
But you're not going to sound like Miles at the end of the day because he already did that. And that's why he's Miles. You're better off putting that energy towards something that you can make your own. And you don't have to play Cherokee, at quarter note equals 600 in fucking 7/4 or whatever, you can do something else with it. It doesn't have to follow the tradition.
Yeah.
The tradition, sometimes there's a lot of gatekeepers out there who would like, oh, you got to play this tune as a ballad. This is one of the best ballads ever written. And it's like, okay, that's great for 60 fucking years ago or whatever, like back when on vinyl you could only record 8 minutes of music or whatever, or just whatever, like that was great. They already did that. And that's what I think a lot of guys are just afraid to do because we're so afraid of offending the tradition.
Yeah.
But it's not like Charlie Parker's going to get up and he's going to, show up in your bedroom like a night demon or something. Like nothing's going to happen. You just do whatever you feel is in your creative capacity.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most liberating thing to do. And definitely, I'm not the one to say that I've perfected this school of thought because I still get super self-conscious and I still worry about what people think of me sometimes.
Yeah.
But, moving to Japan and getting this job and not being a full-time musician over there, I mean, it's really helped me liberate myself in my thinking.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so I'm going to have a job. I'm going to be living. This is what I want to do. I want to live in this country and try it out. Better now than, when I'm married and I have my wife breathing down my neck and I have to do all these responsibilities,
Yeah.
Better now to do what I want to do, and whatever anybody else thinks, it's not really any skin off my nose.
Yeah. For sure, man. Well, I've been watching a lot of John Mulaney and Nick Kroll's Big Mouth, and I hope that the ghost of Charlie Parker shows up in my bedroom. As a guiding force. But, well, man, I have to say this has been, and there's no disrespect to any of the other episodes because they've all been fantastic. But I mean, I think this has certainly been my favorite episode of Bandstand, and we could go on for 3 more hours, and I was
we did the other day. We were
so happy
outside talking.
but I got for one of those other unspoken projects, which will come out later. I got to jump on with John Mills. But man, real quick at the end, of course, as always, we have the your favorite gig from hell story. So, is there anything that sticks out to you as like?
Yeah, there is. I played this gig with this one singer from North Texas, and I won't say his name because he's still out there.
Sure.
But we had this gig. He drove all the way down from Dallas, and we were playing on one of these cruises that go on the lake downtown.
Yeah.
This double-decker boat type situation thing. And it was called the Blues Cruise. So we get on here, we're wearing suits, we look like a couple of jazz nerds. We start playing like Billy's Bounce and like all these other blueses. Yeah. And there's all these like rednecks on the boat, and they're all getting so triggered. And they're like, don't you guys play anything like more upbeat, like some Stevie Ray Vaughan? And then at that moment, I was just like, it was at that moment he knew he fucked up, you know? And the crazy thing was that the singer was not having it. He got super offended and super triggered that they were not digging the music. And I was just like playing, and then I slowly started to like creep back and downstairs and go to the bar. And I was like, I'm just gonna wait for this thing to blow over, because I look to the corner of my eye and he's getting into it with the audience, and they're like yelling at each other. And he's like, well, why the fuck do you guys hire us for this gig and blah, blah. And they were both already drunk. So I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna wait this out downstairs. And the event coordinator had told us, you guys can stay on the boat and just enjoy the food and the drink. And then we'll still pay you. And he was so persistent that he wanted to keep playing. What? And I was like, dude, please, can we just end this gig? Like, I don't want to be thrown overboard with all my gear. So finally he had agreed, and we stopped the gig, but we still had like an hour and a half left on this cruise, and it was super awkward. And we were there in our suits, and we're just like trying to avoid eye contact with everybody else. And it was just awful. It was awful. It was a literal blues cruise, like blues, like Stevie Ray Vaughan, that kind of shit. And we're over here playing bop, and I'm playing like McCoy Tyner and shit. Everybody's like, what the hell is this crap? It was awful.
Man.
It was awful.
Oh man, a different blues, man.
It was a different kind of blues.
Damn. At that point, I mean, you just got to take the mic from the singer.
Dude, I was very close to just like swimming to shore. I felt so uncomfortable.
You're like, I'll buy a new keyboard and amp in the morning.
Yeah. There was another gig too that I had, but we don't have enough time for it. But there was this European couple that wanted to do like an orgy or something. It was in San Antonio. This is like back in the day when I first started out. That's a story for another day.
Well, we'll definitely have you back on, do like a Damian Garcia returns, and we'll keep everyone with bated breath for that story.
Dude, there's so many. It was a pleasure, man.
Dude, Damian, I love you, man. This was really, really fun, and I'll talk to you very soon, and we'll get this out in the next couple days.
All right, take it easy.
What a day this has been, what a swell mood I'm in. Why, it's almost like being in love. There's a smile on my face for the whole human race. Why, it's almost like being in love. All the music of life seems to be like a bell that is ringing for me. And from the way that I feel when that bell starts to peal, why, I swear I was falling. I know that she was calling. Why, I swear I was falling. I know that she was calling. Why, it's almost like being